Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories. Welcome back to So Here's My Story. I'm Jodi.
And I'm Eliot. And listen, before we do anything else, I'm actually going to be organized for a minute. And I'm going to jump right in and thank our sponsors.
You say it with such like dun dun dun.
Yeah, I know. It's like.
Did you have a lot of coffee this morning?
I did. I'm really hyped up on caffeine. So let me thank our sponsors. First, Tom Loveland at Mind Over Machines, Cat's Copy, the architecture firm of GWWO, Herbert and Ethel Inc., and Mary Craft Staffing and HR Solutions.
So organized of you. I'm so proud of you.
I know. But okay, so here's the part where I'm not organized, because I know that we can get off on a story, which is kind of the title of the podcast. But I have to ask you, because we haven't seen each other in a little while. Did you ever watch Will and Grace, like back in the day?
The original one?
Yeah, the original one.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know it came back.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so have you seen this?
Yeah, I have. I'm getting all like trepidatious because I feel like I'm going to step on toes here.
No, I'm curious, especially because of your reaction. What did you think of the new one?
So I really liked the old Will and Grace.
Yeah.
I've only seen the first one, I will say. So I haven't seen the second one, but I watched the first new one. Yeah. I just feel like they're trying way too hard.
Way too hard, right?
Way too hard.
Way too hard.
And I feel awful saying that because I've seen so many people say like, oh, like everything's right in the world now that Will and Grace is back.
I know. Well, here's the thing. I was really excited. I so wanted to like this. And my wife and I used to watch Will and Grace, and we were looking forward to this.
Was it like your well, maybe not your thing, but was it like a ritual sort of?
Yeah, because it was on, I'll probably have my TV eras wrong, but I think it was, with ER and Friends and Seinfeld and all that. It was right around like
Thursdays?
The golden
like
age
must-see
of
TV kind of.
Yeah. And so when it came on,
back when TV actually mattered what day it was on.
Correct. You couldn't binge watch. You had to wait for the next episode.
Right.
So Nikki told me that Will and Grace is coming back on, and it's coming back on, and it's Thursday, and you have to make sure that you're home and you're doing this. And so we're really excited to have it come on. And then it aired, and I looked at her and I felt like I was kicking a puppy. So I was like, yeah.
Yeah. Did she like it?
I think that she was so invested in wanting to like it that she liked it.
She's committed to liking it.
She's committed to liking it. But she recognized that it was just too much, but figured, oh, okay, well, they're just getting that out of the way, and then they'll fall back into...
Which is my... Okay, wait, so pause for just a second. I have a request.
Okay.
So I had a story...
right. We do have that. That's what we do.
Remember, that's what we're doing here, why we're here to record.
Yeah.
But can we just stick with this? Because I actually, believe it or not, have a tie to a very important business issue from this story that's popping in my head right now.
You don't mean change the entire podcast to Will and Grace, right?
No.
No, just this episode.
Just this episode. Instead of the story I was going to do, that we just roll from here.
Take it away.
So the thing that this makes me think of is a couple things. One, we could probably do a whole conversation on like trying to recreate things that should be dead, which I'm not saying it should be dead. But like,
are you trying to go for catch lightning in a bottle? Or?
Not really. Just, we could go back like to all the trappings of when you're trying to bring back something that was, the sort of heightened expectations of what it is. I wasn't like a crazy Will and Grace, so I didn't have like really high expectations.
Right.
And I was still disappointed, but I thought it was going to be a fun show to watch with my daughter, anyway. Here's what I think is really relevant though, from a business perspective. And I do actually have a couple stories of specific business examples, where this is relevant. And that is, it's not just that they're trying too hard. I suspect, and here's the business relevance, I suspect that they are not clear, or maybe it's not even not clear, but not comfortable with perhaps what their real value is, like what was great about that show. And the reason I think this is it feels like they think they had to do one thing to be funny and relevant now, whereas let me actually say it a different way. I think what was great about them before was just they just felt fun to be around, like just in a very relaxed kind of being themselves way. They were funny. And
they could be doing anything, everyday life. Just you like these characters and how they'd react to,
and they were super unique and not very realistic, and very goofy and very caricaturized, but still just them walking around being themselves was funny.
Yeah.
And now what it reminded me of was I'll jump off a quick tangent, but I think it'll make what I'm trying to say make more sense than the way I'm trying to say it. Years ago, there was an online to-do app that was in its very early stages that I stumbled upon somehow. And what was really powerful about it was one of the very first ones to ever use natural language in the subject line. So in what I found to be a huge barrier with a lot of those productivity apps was, I could put in like call Eliot, but then I have to go into another field to say tomorrow and another field to assign it to somebody in another field to make it a high priority. And you could just write in the line, call Eliot tomorrow. And then there were a couple if you used an asterisk or whatever, it would flag it a number of flags, priority, whatever. So you could much more easily make the lists more relevant and sortable and whatnot. Yeah. Really powerful. And I actually had a lot of clients who were using it. And so I was in contact with the company because I was having them change some permissions so that I could do things. Anyway, all that's really boring. The company reached out to me and said, hey, you're clearly one of our early adopters. You're clearly getting a lot of value out of it. Could we schedule a call to talk about what you're liking? I was like, absolutely. I love stuff like that. So I get on the call with them. And the young lady was like, she goes, I really want to hear your story. She was like, but let me guess, is it our squirrel or whatever? Like the squirrel, this mascot thing that they had, which frankly, I hadn't even noticed. And she goes, cause we know that like what we're really trying to bring to the market is we're making productivity fun. And she goes off on this whole tangent about this like squirrel that's
the like the Microsoft paperclip?
Yes, actually kind of, except it didn't move or anything. It was just their not icon, but whatever, their mascot. Yeah, it was like this little squirrel thing or whatever. And I guess they thought it was like fun colors. I don't even remember because I just recall making this what face in the conversation while we're talking. And I was like, no, like that, I don't give a hoot about any of that. Like, let me tell you and she was shocked.
Oh, you probably just deflated this poor person.
I think so. But that's actually what fascinates me about this is by not knowing and being comfortable with what value you're actually bringing, you can put all this energy and effort into amping up things that people actually don't even need and may even actually detract. And that's what I feel like is happening with the Will and Grace thing is they could have just come back on and been themselves. And I actually would have really enjoyed it. And I think it would have actually been easier, but it feels like they've tried to amp up everything to be more relevant and more this and more that.
Right. I think they were self-conscious that 11 years had gone by. So they wanted to become super relevant on the whole Trump thing. And so to the point where, I don't know if you remember the scene, but Karen pulled a Cheeto out of the bag to compare it to Trump's coloring. And that joke was relevant maybe during the campaign, but it, and everything. And this is an aside,
it wasn't actually Karen, it was Grace, but that's okay.
Okay. One of them. It was in the scene with Karen and Grace. Yes. But so one of them was just making all these references and felt like they had to get that out of their system. And it just really, I didn't tune in to Will and Grace for the political humor. I tuned in because of the characters. And then the other part of it is, and I don't want this to come out wrong, but this was really my impression. The show to me, Will and Grace to me, wasn't about being gay. Mm-hmm. It wasn't about the fact that Will and Jack are gay. It was just, here are these characters that was certainly part of who they were and how they reacted to the world and what their situations were. But I think that you said you only saw the first one, but the second one also was really focused on, about being gay and about a lecture of how far rights have come for the LGBTQ community and all that, and all of these important things. But I think you're right. I'm not sure that Will and Grace knows at this point what made them Will and Grace?
Well, and there's so that actually then brings up a whole other curiosity for me, is what happens when you as a company feel called or driven to shift and change and go in a different direction, and people know you and love you and think of you and for something different. It's a really interesting dilemma when you are like, that may be something that's really important to them, to make more of an overt stand for some of those things. Yeah. I mean, to me, that didn't really occur to me as much as it just felt like everything, to me, they felt like the episode felt like the episode one felt like they took everything that used to just sort of be this like subtle, nuanced background thing, and they put all the buttons on the stereo equalizer up to 11. And it just felt too contrived and just trying too hard, is best to say. But now that you're saying that, it sort of took me on another bent of what happens when you want to be more relevant in a different, and people are expecting you to be, one way, and now there's something else that matters to you.
Yeah, you're right, because they have to figure out, are they changing direction? Are they going to be responsive to what they perceive the audience is going to be? And this kind of gets back to your productivity app story, because what I'm really curious, and we might not have any way of knowing it, is when they talk to you, and let's say that they were really fixated on the squirrel and making productivity fun. Mm-hmm. And now they're talking to somebody who says, yeah, I didn't notice the squirrel. I really like the natural language, or mm-hmm. I like how it made assigning tasks easier, or whatever it was. Would they take that viewpoint as, hey, we've got to really check and see if that's what our audience wants, or they automatically dismiss you as, well, she's an outlier, she doesn't get us?
Well, that is actually the point. The reason I wanted to ditch my other story and stick with this is that I think many, many companies, and I try to remind myself of this because I fall into the same trap sometimes, guess way too much instead of just going and asking. So this past week, I was meeting with a friend who has a catering prepared foods business. And he was struggling with something that wasn't selling the way he wanted to. And he was guessing. He was like, maybe it's this, maybe it's that, maybe, because I tweaked the menu, maybe it's because of this, maybe it's because of that. And I said, yeah, it might be, you have to ask. Like you have to think of business, I think, like a science experiment. And you have to isolate the variables. You have to change one thing at a time and see if that's the thing. But you have to but never guess if you can ask people and find out what their opinion is. So yeah, if it were me and I had a beloved squirrel and somebody was telling me that it was natural language, my next inclination would be to go talk to other people and find out if it's a blind spot for me, or, is this person really an outlier or not? Because I think any kind of guessing is really dangerous if you can just go ask.
It is. And I think that it's almost imperative in my mind to get somebody else, somebody who doesn't have a vested interest in what the answer is going to be asking, or at least formulating the questions and analyzing it with you. Because if you've always got your thumb on the scale, if you're always looking to weight it, and the inclination is to say, she doesn't get us. I mean, we've talked on the show about fit.
Yes.
Well, she's not a fit. She's not our best client. She's, if she doesn't get the squirrel, she's not our type of people.
Yeah, it may be.
And that may be right. But the other thing, and I just want to make sure that it doesn't get lost. The other thing that I noticed about Will and Grace, and, Will and Grace, Roman numeral 2, as opposed to Will and Grace, the original, is that Will and Grace, the original, although, yes, the characters were writ large, they were caricatures in respect, and that's what you have to be. But they could be doing anything. They could be having an everyday day, and the way they talk to each other, the way they interact was really interesting. And, you got a sense of them. But in the 2 episodes of Will and Grace, Roman numeral 2, there were situations. I mean, big situations. They're going to the White House and decorating the Oval Office, and they're signing in the Rose Garden, and they've got this thing in Karen's robotic shower in number 2, and it just, you don't have a chance. And this is where I bring it back to business. Sometimes I think where the magic happens is when there is no agenda, where the magic happens when nothing is supposed to happen.
Yeah. It's funny because similar but different to that. I think that sometimes the value that you bring as a business or as a leader are the things that like they're not always going to sound terribly sexy or impressive or like big deal-ish. A lot of times I think when you articulate it, it almost sounds like something a 5-year-old would say, like they make me feel better, or it's these small things, or just the, or like you said, when there's no agenda, that, not every big employee meeting has to be, chocked full of content and whatnot, that the value of just connecting as people is so important too.
Yeah. And it's,
we're talking about like two totally different things there in one.
They are
blurry,
but I think they really coalesce into, here's the headline. They coalesce into the reason I don't like Will and Grace too.
So far, they have a few. Are you going to give them another chance for a couple more episodes?
Absolutely, yeah. They can certainly rescue it. It may be, as my wife is so desperately clinging to hope on this, that they get all this stuff out of their system and they hit their stride. They recapture what it was that made them have such a successful run. And I think companies are like that too. Sometimes you're getting together and at this meeting, we've got to get this accomplished. At this meeting, we've got to get that accomplished. We've got 19 strategic priorities and we've got to get this. And then after a little while, you get your legs under you and you begin to develop a rapport with people. Yeah. You understand what's in their wheelhouse and what's not. You understand the value of just talking to them. It's funny. One of my friends, Neil Rubin, used to write for the Jewish Times. And he was the executive editor or something. I apologize if I get your title wrong, Neil. But anyway, one of the columns he wrote that I loved, he was talking about going to services on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the high holidays. But the title of his article was God is in the Hallways. And I loved that. God is in the hallways, because he was saying that the essence of the culture, the essence of what really drew him to the services and what made him feel a personal connection with the Jewish community and with God as he worships God, was not in the structured service being led by somebody up on what we call the bima, but the stage or the pulpit or what have you. But it was what happens in the hallways when you just talk and interact. Yeah,
I'll tell you where I see this just every time that I'm working with a company who wants to do like a leadership team offsite retreat kind of thing, especially if they're doing a couple days together.
Exactly. Yeah,
because on the one hand, you're like, oh my goodness, the Olympic gymnastics it takes to get everybody off-site, to put everything. I mean, it heightens this need to like, oh my God, we have to make use of every single minute. And I feel it too. I have to pull hard on that wheel of like, okay, while we eat, we could do this at lunch, and then we could do this, and then we'll have to do this thing, and we'll make sure we do this. And yet I know deeply, and I really make a stand for this in these conversations is, one of the things we did really, really well at the architecture firm I was with is that I remember clearly from going to those annual retreats was that, yes, we got a lot of hard work done during the days, but the evenings where we, had a couple cocktails, talked over dinner, played charades, laughed, talked, those were the things that bound us together in a way that helped us lead the company as well as we did. And not that you only do those things, but you miss out on so much if you imagine that the magic is only in the structured, outcome-driven parts.
Right, because after all, I can't be alone in this, that some of my best ideas or the epiphanies come when I'm walking the dog or when I'm in the shower.
Well, so not only are you not alone in that, but it's I can't remember if we've talked about this before. There's actually neuroscience behind that. For you to have an aha, for you to have an epiphany, you have to have alpha waves present in the brain, which are relaxed. It's why people have ideas in the shower. I used to have people say in their car, but most of us are listening to podcasts.
And you can find us on iHeartRadio and
listen to podcasts. We're on phone calls. We're like thinking about things in the car, so we don't have our good ideas there. And as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, you need to be in touch with that really brilliant aha part of your brain. And there has to be chill time, relaxing time for that.
Yeah. And so, and I am determined, as I know you can tell, I am determined to stay on theme by telling you that's what's missing in Will and Grace too.
Is downtime.
Is the downtime.
Yeah.
Because it seems to go from one frenetic thing to the next frenetic thing to the next frenetic thing.
Well, so here's what's fascinating to me about that, because I feel like, especially right now in this moment in time, the last thing anyone needs is more frenetic things. And here's, I'm going to contrast it with another show that some people love and hate. So This Is Us. I don't know if you've seen This Is Us.
No, I haven't.
Okay. One of the criticisms I've heard of it, of people who kind of either love it or just don't get it, and the people who don't like it,
people love us or they don't.
Get it. You love how I said that, or they're just like, yeah, what's this about? Because while there are certainly some dramatic things that happen, it's not without climactic denouements and whatnot. But it's just a very like paced at normal life pace kind of. It doesn't have this frenetic feeling to it at all. It's some people think it's a little bit slow because of that, but it is the counterpoint to the way Will and Grace came back into the market of it is just this like, it's people being people. And that is the story. And to me, the phrase that keeps coming back to me as we've had this whole conversation is, one thing, the downtime, but also relaxing into it's enough to just be the way Will and Grace was. They were just people going about random things, and that was enough. And then this is what I get sort of irritated with some branding things sometimes, where it feels like you have to like amp up with all this extra not silly, but like all this extra branding stuff. Whereas like your branding should reflect who you really are, not some like showboaty version. And that's what I feel like Will and Grace did, is they put this like showboaty version on it. Yeah.
And we won't get started on my thoughts about everything being new and awesome, but because that's another thing. But it does go back to, and when you were talking about this, I was thinking about, well, okay, look at my company, my law firm, for example. We've got set pieces. We've got to accomplish this for this client, contracts and mergers and purchases and litigation and stockholders agreements, whatever it happens to be, listening to client requests. So I'm working with my team to accomplish these things. And then what I'm wondering is, do I leave, and if not, how can I ensure that I leave enough white spaces in there for the alpha waves, for the downtime, so that I'm not in my office eating lunch alone at my desk waiting for inspiration to strike, but I am with my team, but not expecting, okay, by the time we get up from this table, we will have accomplished X.
Yeah. I love that concept of white space. I think about that a lot because, if you've spent any time with any kind of graphics work, like the importance of white space is crucial. And I don't think many of us leave much room for white space in our days or in our companies, in our agendas for what we want to get done in a day, and certainly not in our agendas for what we want to get done over the course of a year.
Yeah. And the thing that I believe is, you had mentioned the architecture firm you worked at, you had these retreats, but my suspicion, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that if you describe some of what you did, the charades and things, as the white space, that it wasn't just once a year and that was it. And there was no other white space during the other 363 days or whatever before this 2-day retreat or 3-day retreat.
It's actually all week.
What's that?
We did a full week.
Okay.
Every other year, but all right, and a shorter one.
So I tend to doubt that there was 51 weeks of non-white space.
No, in fact, we actually did, not everyone ate in the lunchroom at lunch, but a lot of people did. And we would or like grouply, whatever, work the crossword puzzle from the newspaper every day. And that was a great white spacey kind of, it's like active rest. It's not full white space like we were all hanging out in hammocks or something. Yeah. But it was just time to hang out as people and laugh and make fun of each other.
And that's my point. I don't think that, I think you do it like working out or like dieting. In other words, you can't just eat incredibly healthy for 2 weeks out of the year and then for the other 50 weeks, it's just fast food. And you can't get stronger if you go to the gym and are really rigorous for 2 weeks out of the year. And then for 50 weeks, you're just never see the inside of a gym or never step foot on a treadmill. So I think the key is where I gravitate towards, and the lesson I take from this conversation is to build in more of that white space and not move from set episode to set episode to set episode. And I think that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, that's funny because the takeaway for me is more on the being cool with what made you great in the first place, even, and not feeling the need to overly hype or overly dramatize it into something it does like that can actually harm. And like it makes me curious with that show, like what was that conversation look like that they didn't just continue with where they were, that they felt the need to like dun dun dun, like amp it up or something like that.
Yeah. And so it's interesting. We both have two different takeaways on why Will and Grace failed us on a deeply personal level.
I have one last thing I have to say. Like I halfway through, I'm like, I wonder if we'll lose listeners over this. Like,
the rabid Will and Grace contingent is just, I'm done with these people.
Done with you. Goodbye, Eliot and Jodi.
So that's our story.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so grateful for everyone who's listening in, and we're especially grateful to all of our patrons who've joined us over at patreon.com to support our efforts here. And we hope to see you next week.
And listen, having told our story, we'd love to hear yours.
Ooh, yeah.
So I guess what we're trying to say is the floor is yours. Go to sohere'smystory.com and join the conversation.
Wait, before you go, there are 3 things that we really want you to know.
First, you can find show notes and links to all of the random things we happen to mention during the episode by visiting our website, sohere'smystory.com.
The second thing is we like to talk.
And not just to each other.
That's right. So what we really want to hear is your story. So while you're there, you'll also find links to connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and other ways to contact us with questions, suggestions, or even to share your own story.
And if you love the show and want to support future episodes, you'll also find the link to our Patreon page where we share our extra bonus content.
Or if you can't support us financially, it'd be great if you could leave us a 5-star review at iTunes, Stitcher, or whatever podcast service you use to listen to us. And be sure to tell all your friends.
Until next time.